We'll call this meeting to order. Public comment session. During this time of public comment session, I just want to quickly pass something out to everybody. When we had a new board member sworn in, I thought it'd be important to give everybody a copy of basically our controlling document, which is Title 18. And I had asked and directed the general manager to highlight certain aspects that I found were useful, because we really need to get to know this document, because this defines our jobs and our roles. And what's, as a new board member, what I think probably the most important thing for you to understand is what is my job in this role as a director of the board here at the Clinton Utility Board. And over the short 3 years, I think it's been 3 years that I've been on the board, at times there's been, I think, misunderstanding, I think good faith about what our role is in relationship to our city. And I know I was confused by that, and this board and this utility is independent from the city. We do not serve the citizens as much as we serve ratepayers. So our fiduciary duty is to the ratepayers and is also to our employees. And our employee happens to be Mr. Fay. And then Mr. Fay's job is to run the day-to-day operations here with our oversight, so to speak. And that's just all I'm going to comment about that. And I just invite you all to look at it. And if you have any questions, please ask myself or Greg. And with that, I will move on to if there's any questions.
Thank you, Zach.
You're welcome. If there's not any questions, I will move on to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion for the approval of minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Here a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now move on to approval of vouchers. We have the vouchers that are here on our screen. Any questions about the vouchers? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Move on to the monthly reports for April, and I will turn it over to General Manager Fay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are pleased as we look at our financials and as we track the impact of the COVID-19 and how that has impacted our revenues. Be reminded that these statements, because of the timing issue, you're really looking at the close of April here, and we still have May and June to go. But that being said, and I know Dudley is chomping at the bits because it's a very positive position to be in, where we are in relation to what we had forecasted and where we currently are, and our expectations for the May and June statements. So Dudley, if you would care to further the detail on that, it would be great.
Before you have the revenue and expense summary for both departments through April of this fiscal year. The electric department had a net income for the month of $119,954, and the water sewer had a net income of $35,413. In the electric department, year to date, we are $435,000 ahead of the forecast. Despite the electric sales being down, and the power cost has also been down, but keep in mind, as I would like to remind you, when we made the decision, when you all made the decision to go to this long-term partnership agreement with TVA, we got a 3% credit on a lot of our standard service sales, that being the normal residential, commercial, not the big industrial. But And that is amounted to $855,000 through May, so it'd be $700 and some odd thousand dollars through the month of April. That has really impacted us being so far ahead in this electric department forecast, because the weather, whereas I always like to say, normally we have a hot winter, and a hot summer and a mild winter, or a mild summer and a cold winter. This year it's kind of been mild and mild in both seasons, and then the COVID hit and that impacted industrial sales. But despite that, our expenses are down quite a bit, $342,000 less than we had anticipated, and I'm not speaking of power costs there. And if you add that, we're still $435,000 ahead of the forecast through the month of April. In the water and sewer department, the sales are up in the water department, 51,000 more than we'd forecasted. Sewer sales are down 22,000. Keep in mind, not every water customer is a sewer customer. That makes a difference, and especially when you get into industry, some of them just have water. But our expenses are way under $174,880 less than we'd anticipated, which puts us right at $200,000 ahead of the forecast for the year through April. And next month, keep in mind, next month is a 3 payroll month. We're going to be hit with extra expenses and reduced sales, but come year end, I expect us to be in pretty good shape.
We're already met our year-end budget, so I'm thinking, yes, we will be in great shape.
He's Mr. Positive. And really, that's all I've got, unless you have any specific questions.
Any questions from the board? Do I hear a motion to approve the reports?
I'll make that motion.
Motion and second.
Second.
The motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Move on to project status reports. Mr. Fay?
We've got 2
Capital budget projects in electric that we're tracking for you now, and we have completed 2 since our last board meeting. I want to emphasize, and I know you will agree, but I can validate your assumptions that our folks have done a tremendous job adjusting to the shifting work schedules, both in electric department and the water and sewer departments, the environments that they've had to work in. They've continued to make great progress, and in their maintenance and work capital schedule, we have met and exceeded our budgeted time frame. So I'm very pleased with all of that, and obviously I give every individual employee credit for their dedication and their sacrifice as they step up to do a difficult job. Our first project is this 3 0 ACSR in Kellytown line upgrade. This project replaced about 0.9 miles of 3-phase number 4 copper primary. We're looking over time, we're replacing a lot of copper, because in time as it ages, it gets brittle. And if it becomes very susceptible to a branch hitting the line, it'll snap that line. Sags make a difference in the weather. So as we look, and some of this copper is 30 and 35 and 40 years old. So we're replacing this as a significant line on the Tri-County Boulevard there in Oliver Springs. And it's one of the most heavily loaded copper 3-phase lines we have left in the system. And this is going to provide additional capability and also improve reliability in that area. And I can just tell you that we have improved the reliability. Yesterday, for an example, at 9:07 in the morning, we had our main substation there in Oliver Springs, the main breaker in that sub, open, and we lost 3 circuits which accounted to about 2,162 customers were out of service. Apparently, a large squirrel spent his last moments on top of one of our substation breakers, and that ended him. And it also, because it was inside the footprint, we have protections in the sub. Anything goes on inside the sub, we immediately bring the sub out. So now we've got 2,162 customers out of service. And prior to our self-healing grid capability, or we call it FLISR, Fault Location Isolation and Service Restoration, it would have been necessary for us to send a crew to the substation. Then slowly, because of load balancing, we would have brought sections of the circuits back online. So it could very easily have taken us an hour and a half to 2.5 hours for that to happen. With FLISR, it automatically activated when we lost the sub, and it checks in the sub. We even have cameras in the sub. The first circuit was restored in 20 seconds from the time of the outage. In 20 seconds, we brought 496 customers, had their power restored. 60 seconds after that, FLISR restored 763 customers on the second circuit. And the third circuit, because we had an active line work, we had a crew on Hannah Drive, we put what we call a caution order up. In other words, that we do electronically, and we also do physically within the system operations. Anytime we've got a crew on a line, we put a caution order, which means the safety factor is there is no automatic restoration. You know, everything's in a hole. So FLISR essentially waited for active input from the system operator before it energized the remaining circuit. So within 80 seconds now, radio communication was established with the line crew, and the all clear was launched, and the caution order was released, and FLISR restored the remaining 903 customers. All 2,162 customers were restored in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I can tell you, folks, nobody's doing that. Chattanooga, which got $112 million to do it, but there's no other municipality in the country that has designed and written the code to make all of this happen. This is phase 2 of the FLISR, because the first was an event on the circuit. This is an event at the sub, you see. So that was the second phase. What do we do if we lose a sub? So now you've got to balance all of those circuits. With a caution order, 2 minutes and some odd seconds before we're back into business. It's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So we're doing really well in that, is what I'm trying to tell you. And that process benefited certainly those folks yesterday morning. We're doing aerial cable on Redbud. That's in town here. That's about 0.3 miles. We're replacing that with this aerial cable as much in the subdivisions as we can. we're moving to this aerial cable, which works very well. It's very reliable. And as we upgrade certain sections in the wooded areas, we're going to be using this aerial cable. And that's all I have, unless someone has a question on any of that.
Any questions? We ready to move on to approval of purchase orders?
On the transformers, yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Fair.
If you'll look at what you have in front of you on the transformer quotes, it's a little bit confusing, I would think, because what would make it easier is you bid out into 6 distributors, and then you look at low bid, and then you just pull the trigger on that. You've done your due diligence. We cherry pick, so not only do we look at low bid up there, and low bid is $104,000. And now we're recommending $110,000 to be spent on these transformers, and we've cherry picked them. And you say, well, good gosh, I'm thinking I could help you with that decision. What we do is we do a present worth value, and it evaluates the losses. And if you notice, and we have mentioned more than one occasion, the line loss, which we enjoy, is 1.5% lower than the valley standard, and 2 and 3% lower than even some of our neighbors. And when you're running over $80 million in revenue, you can see that 1% on $80 million is a significant amount. And part of what helps in that is that we evaluate the losses on these transformers. So for $6,500 more on the initial cost, the present value yield, we show a savings of $18,104. So when we use that, that's why we offer the total cost of the purchase order and recommend it, because in actuality, we see that as the low bid. So I would recommend that the board approve the transformer quotes for $110,593.
Do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Anybody got any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, we have for your consideration work orders. And the first work order is 1153 in the electric department. This project will replace about 1.8 miles of single-phase number 2 ACSR primary conductor with 3-phase 1-aught all aluminum conductor, and this is that aerial cable on Tillery Road in Claxton. This line is one of the most heavily loaded single-phase lines, and I use that phrase a lot because we do evaluations, and we continue to do annual evaluations for the load, and the load makes a difference. So when we look at what lines do we replace, we look at the loaded lines, and then we also factor in if we've been out there to do repairs, because that's an indication of the copper, the brittle copper breaking a lot, which affects the quality of service that we provide with outages or the duration of outage. So we're always looking at, and that phrase you'll hear a lot, one of our most heavily loaded, because that would raise that level on our board in order to replace. It'll provide better reliability, it'll give us different capabilities, and we're always looking for improving our capability with FLISR. Right now, we're, with any single event on any circuit, we have narrowed that it's going to be 300 and some, the maximum 300 and some customers out of service at any one given event. In other words, we can tighten the system up close enough to where we can isolate no more than 300 and some customers. As we continue to do these upgrades, what the objective is to continue to shrink that and isolate a lower number of customers. You know, there's a cost associated with that, and eventually we're going to hit that cost ratio. But that's all. As we look, when we upgrade these lines, we also look for the capability in order to improve our isolation. And rarely, I can tell you, even now, we're able to isolate less than 300, but 300 and some is the average across our system. The estimated capital budget on this, we projected at $360,000. So you can see that the total cost of the work order is $370,000. That includes the $33,000 contingency. So we're hoping that this will come in at or near what we forecasted last year. And I would recommend approval of work order 1153, Mr. Chairman.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I'm hearing a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Greg, just a quick question.
Sure.
What's the expected life of new copper versus new aluminum?
Well, I'll give you the short answer. About the same. About the same. Cost then becomes an issue. When you talk about ACSR, that's all. It's all clad, steel reinforced, aluminum clad, steel reinforced wire. So the steel, as it's wrapped in the wire, gives us some of the potential problems with the copper, with the being brittle. So if something hits that at the same age and time, it'll be less likely to break because of that steel reinforcement. So we're using copper less because of the cost associated with it, but there are applications where it makes the most sense to do that. So we value that all the time. We've got lines that 35 and 40 years old. We're looking to take all of those down because the maintenance on those, that level begins because we mark every place where everything is. And if you go down the road, especially on other systems, you'll see what we call a squeeze on. And that is where you essentially couple one line to another, and it's midline. So you'll see it, and it's about that big. And the line goes in, squeezes on this side, and now you've got a coupling in there. The more of those you see down any line, it's not a good sign. It's not, because that's where the brakes are, you see. And what they've done is they've put that line back together. You want to minimize that. So over time, although it conducts electricity, it impacts the reliability of that.
Do I remember right that during World War II, copper was so scarce that we started going to aluminum lines, and eventually they had a lot of problems with those?
They did, and that's all in the process of how they do that. You know, all of those have been overcome. But the fact of it is, most of the copper you see now is recycled, and the recycled copper isn't near of the quality of what it was, you know, coming out of the mines. Now, copper has been in the ground for over 50 years, and just fine. You get brand new copper in the house, and 7, 12, 13 years later, Ernie, our buddy, pulled all the copper out of his house. It was squirting it had more water coming out of his pipes than he did out of the shower. And I mean, it frustrated him so much. And his house was less than 15 years old, you know, all the pinholes that come in it.
I had to go through and put PEX in my house.
Yeah, now you did the
Chinese
right
copper
thing.
was the same way.
Exactly right. So yeah, you value all of that, you know, but we don't get cheap stuff in wire. And I mean, when you get to 1 aught and 4 aught, that's some big wire going down through there. If you look in our substations, all of that going to the bus work and all that, that's all copper. I mean, that's big copper in there. That's why you get the folks that think it's a good idea because it weighs a lot. Let's go get that copper out of the substation. You know, I mean, not a good idea. Sometimes it's what I call the squirrel scenario. One guy in Petros tried to take copper, and apparently he got so close it arced on him, and we found out who it was because apparently he had medication, and he left the medication bottle with his name on it, you know. So, yeah, copper we use in a lot of the substations.
Just sideline. You know, in Tellico Village, you can't use copper in a house. That ultra expensive neighborhood down on.
All PEX, you're talking about water, yeah, right, yeah. How about that? That's amazing. I'm surprised. Well, PEX gives you 17% more swell for freezing, which is really what they like. If you're talking about type A, Ubenor, PEX, you know, that'll do a swell, which is really great. You won't have water till it unfreezes, but you won't have a broken pipe.
Steve Long, sometimes Steve Combs and Faye will have conversations. I don't know what they're talking about.
Y'all can start again. We're
I have
done.
no idea.
Y'all can start again.
Not my background. Any other questions? Good question. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll swiftly move on to 1170. This is 1.5 miles of single phase, a primary conductor that's going to be upgraded to we call our 336 conductor. This is on West Wolf Valley. Again, this budget item was at $300,000. Our total cost on this work order is $302,000. A lot of what we're doing there too is moving it from the fields to the side of the road. Because that's a commitment I made. As much as we can, when we police a line, I want to be in a truck with a light rather than me walking in somebody's back field. So every time we upgrade a line, not every time, but most every time, when we upgrade a line, we're going to bring it from the back of the house and the back of the fields onto state right-of-way. So this is a $300,000 budget item at 302, and it is at West Wolf Valley, upgrading that conductor, and I recommend your approval for that.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Now moving on to approval of property and casualty insurance for this fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dudley's going to speak to this, but I'm going to just preface this by saying that we've been in business with Distributors Insurance Company for many, 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 many years. Really, we were one of the first to back in the '80s when they first became a subsidiary under TVPPA, because it catered to specifically electric utilities and like the substations, the transformers in there, all special, what I call specialty items. They provided an avenue forward for us, and they've always been very competitive in price. As part of our duty, though, we have to make sure that we continue to look, and we look every year, and that's where you see this other insurance company proposals. Every line except for the boiler and machinery, because both of those are coming out of Hartford, so they would have quoted the same to both agents. But we're significantly lower, and the truth be known, if it was reversed, although I wouldn't try to jump that high, but even if they were close, yet DIC wasn't low, I would be recommending those because of the specifics of the lines of coverage. So I'm very pleased that DIC is low in this, and we would recommend that. And Dudley, I'm sorry if you want to say anything else.
You did great, man.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? It's been my experience with my understanding of insurance that a lot of times these type of companies that cater to one specific industry and fall under the umbrella of a association like the TVPPA, not only do they have policies that are usually tailored to that industry that will fit. So when we're looking at liability limits, but then there's going to be policy language in those agreements, in those insurance agreements and contracts that will govern what will they actually cover. And so I know a lot of whether it's the legal field or whether it's the dental field or whether it's the medical field, they have people that cater specifically to those industries, and usually, not always, but usually you're just much better served dealing with people that understand the language and understand the issues. When you have a claim, they're familiar with it. So I'm strongly in favor of the recommendation. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I can give you one example, which is a quick and a good one. The transformers, $750,000 to $1.2 million in the substations, the big one. Hartford, who we love and have a good relationship with, they moved from going to replacement cost to depreciated cost. That was in the
Big
language.
difference, yeah.
Tremendous, because we've got transformers that are 50 years old, you say. So what's the depreciation cost on that transformer? $150. The because of the association and DIC, we were able to move that back to replacement cost. And that's a big thing, which normally you probably, most wouldn't even know that difference, but the association is on top of that.
Yeah. Good point. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 10.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to not say a word, and I'm going to turn this over to Director of County Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Fay, I appreciate that. Each year, we have to file this resolution with the state. And what it is unclaimed property. And we have a customer come in and they set service, we get a deposit, and at the end, we apply that deposit. And they may have a credit, and we'll send the check to their last known address. And a lot of times, that check never gets cashed, or we don't have the right address, or whatever, and that check just doesn't get cashed. Well, years ago, the state took that money and they just hung on to it. You turned it into the state and they hung on to it. But then they decided, well, we'll start letting utilities ask for it back. So what the state does is they take that money and they'll run it in the Nashville paper and put it on their website, and then see if anybody claims it. And then if we want, we don't have to, but if we want, we can request for that money to come back, whatever doesn't get claimed. And then we hold it. They keep a little administrative fee out of it, about 25%. But we hold it, and then if a customer comes to us and says, hey, I want that money, we have to pay them the whole amount. Well, it's to our benefit just to get that money, because most of the time, very few times do they ever ask for it. So, but they require us to jump through this hoop every year of filing a resolution. They don't want to make it easy where you can just do it one time. So every year we have to do this to get that money back. We do try to track these people down, though. We don't just try to get the money. We look them up, we try to find them and get them their money, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. And over years' time, it can be $4,000 or $5,000.
Hear a motion to approve.
So motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Pretty straightforward. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Yeah, let's get to the budget.
Mr. Chairman, our Director of County Finance, as he always has done, as evidenced by his projections, always does and supplies the board with a conservative budget, but also does it in such a nice way. He's designed this really well, and this is the folder that I get from him, and I mean, and so we can drill down to nauseam in this thing. But I told him again today how much I appreciated how professional he has been in his accuracy and his dedication to providing this utility what I consider an outstanding budget that you can rely on. So I'll now let you just go ahead and devastate yourself with this COVID-19. But
Thank you. I want to start with the cover. And the reason I want to start with the cover is I grew up with Darrell Stair, and I don't know if y'all follow I Love Clinton on Facebook, but he puts all these pictures on I Love Clinton. And he put this lower one on there, and I thought, that looks just like a picture we got at CUB of prior to Norris Dam. So I thought that was a cool comparison. So the top picture was prior to Norris Dam and how it flooded Market Street, and the bottom picture is from our good friend Darrell Stair. So, and I asked him if I could use it. He said sure. So, all right. I like to start with the charts, because for those of you who haven't been in this before, it kind of helps you see a little bit. And we start with where the money comes from. So our sales in the electric department, about 51% is from our residential customers. 37% comes from our larger customers, and by large, I don't just mean the industrial, I mean the grocery stores, McDonald's, it's the people that have over 50 kV demand in a month. And Greg has got a whole presentation on that if you want to see that, you know, how that works. The small general power are your smaller stores like antique stores and even barns and things like that that don't have high demand. Now, where does that money go? Well, and these are based on the end of last fiscal year's numbers. You can see that pie right there in the electric department. TVA gets right at 76% of the money that we take in. So if we take in $100, we're sending TVA $76 right off the bat. And the rest of that money is what we have to operate on. We have to operate, we have to pay our employees, we have to buy all our materials and pay for all the supplies and things. So our operating expense is about 9.8%. Maintenance is taking care of all that, is about 5%. And the taxes, which are property tax and payroll tax, is about 3.3%.
Dudley, real quick, sorry to interrupt. On that operating expenses out of that 9.8, how much, do you know how much of that is overhead for employees, salaries and benefits?
Well, payroll would be about, right about 8 million, you know, with the overtime, and then you'd have to add your benefits to that, so you'd probably put another 75% on top of that for their benefits and things for that, so.
Ballpark, and how much percentage-wise of that 9.8 would that represent, you think?
It would be a small percent, let's see.
Percent in payroll, it's less than 1/10 of our budget, less than 1/10
Yeah.
of
Well,
1%.
I think that's important
It is.
to pull out of the numbers, because I think sometimes the people that may be looking at us tonight and you know, to understand that
It's a very
such
small.
a fraction.
It is, it's
I mean, a fraction of what we're dealing with here at the utility.
When you're talking 80 million in expenses, that is
Yeah.
a
And
fraction.
revenue,
And expenses.
Right.
So you're correct.
Thank you, thank you.
Depreciation makes up about 5.8%. Now let's look at CUB over the last 10 years. Number of customers, we've been pretty flat. We've only grown about 500 customers in the last 10 years. Our revenue is fairly consistent. Our kilowatt hours sold, you know, it's pretty flat too. Nothing's really jumps off the charts at you. Power costs, what we pay TVA. Now this is kind of the important, because TVA has gone up, and if you remember from Greg's presentations, they put the risk on CUB. So our power cost has gone up, but it's still really kind of flat. Why is it flat? Well, Greg did a PowerPoint for you on the virtual power plant. And you see we started that in 2011, and it's grown and grown how much we save on power cost. So without that virtual power plant, this red chart up here, you would see that rise, that power cost would rise. Those virtual power plant savings save power cost, which in turn helps our margin, our revenue less our power costs. That's what we have to work on, that 25 cents I was talking about, or 25%. So without that virtual power plant, this margin wouldn't be near what it is. That would come off dollar for dollar. So then capital improvements. What have we done the last 10 years in capital improvements? Well, we're spending $6-7 million a year on capital improvements. So the money we take in, we don't just use it for operating expense. We building new lines and putting new wire up and poles and all the transformers. None of that's cheap, as you know, just from the 2 work orders you approved. Tax equivalents. This one's really interesting because this money goes to our community. It goes to the city, the counties. You know, in 2010, we were paying 1.5 million. In 2019, that was up to 2.2 million. So they've grown $700,000, and that's all money to them. There's no expense to that. That's just, we write them a check and they get to use that.
What would those be examples of?
Property tax,
Well,
Well, it's in lieu of tax.
it's in lieu of tax, so, but it's based on all our property, everything. When we improve our property, we have to pay a tax equivalent to each community based on that. Now, the city of Clinton gets most of that, and that'll come up here in a month or two, because we fall under the city, they get the bulk of that.
So if payroll was 8 million and in lieu of taxes over 2 million, you know, you're looking at 25+% of what our entire payroll would be, we paying in lieu of tax.
Yeah, I know the city really, it's a happy day when that comes.
You know, and we're happy to do it because we are good citizens and we do fall under the city of Clinton. And that is a great contribution back to the community that without the Clinton, there would be a Clinton Utilities Board.
So as we improve our system, as our income does well, that number goes up. So they all gain, all the community gains from us being a better system. Our net income, that fluctuates a lot based on the weather, hot, cold, COVID, whatever.
In 2012, Dudley, the jump there was when we went in 2011, in April of 2011, that's when we took the risk. And that's when we were slinging pretty hard because TVA didn't have the mitigating things to keep that KW savings down. We were tremendous winners. And then TVA put a rate structure in that minimized that fluctuation and put everybody on this time of use.
In the water and sewer department, we'll kind of go through the same scenario. Where's the money come from? Well, about these two blocks here, that's water, that's sewer residential, so close to 50% is residential. Industrial are these two pies, piece of the pie right here, so roughly 24%. And then commercial is that piece, and then that public authorities is ACWA, and that's where we treat their sewer for them and then charge them to do so. Where does that money go? Well, there is no TVA in this piece of pie. It all goes to operating and maintenance expense. And that big piece right there is depreciation. And that's what makes it so hard for us to stay positive, is that depreciation number, because we have this plan out there that we have to depreciate, and you have to put a life on it, and it's a big number. It doesn't cost you cash, but on your income statement, it comes out. And that's the piece that makes it hard to keep that bottom line positive in the water and sewer department. But this right here, keep in mind, by not having TVA, when you do have a drop in sales, you don't have that. Whereas that's right, you don't have that offset, because we're not paying somebody 75% of our sales. And that operating and maintenance cost does not come down that much when your water sales come down. The cost of us producing water is a lot less than what we have to pay TVA for producing the electric, basically. Number of customers lose water, gold is sewer. You can see there, pretty consistent, just a few hundred up from 10 years ago. Revenue, it's steadily gone up. Of course, it goes up a little more this year because we just had put a rate increase last year, and this is only through 2019.
Can I ask you a question back on the depreciation on the water and sewer?
Sure.
So at 20%, it sounds like there's, I mean, no, I'm not gonna say this right, but you've got the plan out there, you know, we spend money on the transformers and lines and that kind of stuff from a capital side and electrical side. On the water treatment side and the sewer side, I mean, are we just depreciating the plan out there, or do we see, I mean, cause I don't see the amount of capital being spent. And obviously, it's a much smaller budget. You know, I look, it's $5 million. It's not like, so in theory, it's $1 million in depreciation. So, but I don't feel like we're spending $100,000 a month in
No,
capital projects. So is it like, there's gonna be a wave that hits us in
It's a
5
wave.
or 10 years?
Well,
I know
no.
we just spent some money on redoing some painting, and
Right.
I remember that now.
What
that-
happens is that you have these big chunks. The $750,000 on one pump station. So we do Miller Road, $750,000. You know, that's, boom, that's in, and that's then becomes appreciated. When you're rocking the average of $50-some a month per residential customer, which is the 50% of what we do, there's not a lot coming back in, you know, so it's those big hits, and we depreciate over a long period of time.
Well, the reason I ask that is then, those create cash flow spikes, right? If you have a $750,000. So do we accumulate cash on the water treatment side, water sewer side to handle those, you know?
We do two things.
Okay.
We are debt-free in water and sewer.
Right.
Which is really good, as you know. We have over $2 million in cash.
Okay.
That has been a cushion for these $150,000 hits, you know, and things like that. If we were gonna do a major upgrade and a major project, then we would look to borrow money to do that, because you wanna spread the asset over the life of the beneficiaries of that asset. So we like the fact that we're cash healthy, and we use that. But if we get into a major capital project, like if we were gonna do this water line up to the I-75 under this ARC grant, and I've got news about that, that our contribution on that would have been over $2 million. So we would have gone to the market and issued bonds.
I couldn't look at the balance sheet, my bad.
You're fine.
I think it's a good question.
You're fine.
I was just testing, see if they knew what the balance sheet's at.
So,
Sorry.
so revenues, pretty flat, with the exception of little tweaks to the rates that we've done. And capital improvements, you can see here in 15, we did quite a bit, and overall, it's fairly flat. Change in net assets, that's, what impacts change in net assets is capital contributions. If we get a grant, that'll drive that number up. If we don't, it'll drive that number down. You know, if we have a subdivision come in and they put all this in, and then they donate those assets to us, that raises that number up. The state doesn't count that number when they're doing their little thing. Are you in the black or are you in the red? They used to, but they decided that wasn't fair for some reason. And so you got to try to stay positive before capital contributions, which we are this year. And that's really all I've got on the charts. But if we go to the electric department for the year, if you look across the top, the budget is in this first column we're proposing. We like to call it a forecast more than a budget. This is where we were at the end of March. This is what we estimate through June. This is the projected total for this year, and this is the actual total for last year. So if you're looking across here, you see in 2019 residential, we had 43 million. This year we're projecting 42 million. That being weather related, that impacts that so much. And next year we're saying we're gonna get about to where we were in 2019. If you look at the industrial, however, last year we were at 31 million. This year we're projecting 26 million. That being COVID related. Now, because those plants out there, most of them pretty much shut down in the month of May. And that really has dropped that number. But they are running, my understanding is they're running at about 90% of what they were before COVID hit now. So that's coming back up. I drove through Rusty Wallace Chevrolet the other night. I'm one of these guys that drives through car lots all the time because I'm trading all the time. And they hardly got any vehicles out there. And I'm hearing from salesmen, they're having record sales in vehicles, and maybe it's the incentives, I don't know. But hopefully, that means more new cars are being built and more new parts are needed from these guys out here. That's my hope. But I'm being conservative next year. I'm saying we're gonna be up from this year, but down from 2019. The good news about the big industrial sales is that 25% margin I was talking about. We don't get that on those guys. They have a really reduced rate to be competitive in the valley and not just the valley, but in the nation to attract industry. So the margin on those big customers out there is somewhere between 5 and 7%. So we don't lose near as much when their sales go down. In fact, them sending people home, we may have come out better, because they were at home using electricity. So. But I am forecasting that comes back up some, but not all the way. Again, I try to be somewhat conservative. So overall, our sales are I'm projecting about 80 million as opposed to 76 million for this year, and we had 81 million last year. These other revenues, you remember we suspended the late fees there for a period of time to help our customers. So that's why that number's going from 468 to 373. And next year, I'm saying that's going to be back up there. I'm assuming that things are going to progress on and everything will be positive. As far as our expenses, again, if you compare this, power cost has to go up. If your sales go up, power cost has to go up. Your operating expense, I am projecting that to go up slightly. Maintenance slightly. All those things, taxes and things have to go up slightly. It's just the way things happen. But for the year next year, I'm projecting 2.2 million. This year, 2.4 million. And last year was 3.1. So, any questions on that? Any further discussion you want to have on the electric revenue and expense? How that works as far as the funding, we don't anticipate any rate increases. We don't anticipate borrowing as of today. But there could be a scenario where we would, especially with the rates being so good. If you take where we're at cash-wise, available cash at June of this year, we're projecting 4.3 million. You take our net income, you add the depreciations, which doesn't cost us cash. You're adding that, so you got 11 million there. And you take out the proposed capital outlay, which did not change from the preliminary that you got last month, which is this right here, that 6.6 million. We're taking that back out, and we're saying we're going to have about 5 million next year. That's just a good way to estimate whether you need to borrow money or not. Any questions on the electric? All right, good. We'll move to the water sewer. Categories are the same. You've got, you got this year, projected this, projected next year, projected this year, and last year. As you can see, water sales, all's good. The industrial is the one that, and it went up. But the reason these all went up is because of our rate adjustment. They just didn't go up as much as we had expected them to. But thank goodness we went up on them. Of course, the state would have had a problem if we didn't. And so our sales are up. We're projecting next year there'll be just a little bit more because of the drop in what's happening at the industrial plant.
We're still weighing the impact of the decisions that the policy changes made on how that affected that revenue, though. That's
Right.
part of the reason there has been an impact. We're just weighing out how much that is, and appropriately how to weather that.
The expenses here, again, we expect growth in all categories. We don't have anything major that we know of. And as far as the year, we think our change in net assets, we're gonna be positive again without any rate adjustments, which is what everybody wants to hear. You got, as far as the funds, they work the same way. We estimate at the end of this year, we're gonna have 4.7 million. We're showing replacements of 1.425, which is the same as the preliminary you got last month. And you're gonna have 3.3 million funds available next year. So again, we don't have to borrow based on those projects that we have planned. Of course, Greg mentioned that grant project, which may be a different deal, but it's a great time to borrow, as you know, as you've mentioned that, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to have to borrow if you need to. And that's really all I got budget-wise between the departments. I mean, if you want to get into more detail about anything, I'd be glad to talk more about anything that you
Any
like.
questions? Do you mind looking at the pay scales?
Don't mind at all.
So there was a discussion with a previous board about putting together a pay scale and having I guess a structure for what minimum, midpoint, top out, and I just wanted to direct everybody's attention that general manager has done this, and I'm assuming it's been implemented for decades, and it's been at our disposal. So I just want everybody to see, we can see what these salaries are. We can see how they're being managed, and we can see how they've, attract talent and retain talent. And I just wanted to point that out. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Dudley, you have anything else?
No.
With that being said, I ask to hear a motion to approve the budget.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second?
All right, motion is second. Any discussion? Any discussion, any comments? I think it looks good. We're taking a conservative, particularly as an electric. I think it's responsible. I think we're gonna outpace
I do too.
budget. I think we're gonna be, but it's good to go ahead and forecast conservatively.
Anything I say in conflict to what Dudley says, smart money is on what he says, so, just to be clear.
Any other comments or discussion?
I just want to reiterate what Greg said. This is really great, Dudley. I mean, I can understand it, and, you make it where non-CUB people can see it and understand it, and it's detailed, and it looks great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, budget approved. Okay, so, item number 12, I had met over the past couple of months with the general manager to discuss his employment contract. This is 5 years up, and we discussed some action items about some of the language in the contract. I believe when I look at the termination provisions of the contract, they provide for cause in some ways that are highly favorable for the employee. And when I got to thinking about it in a practical sense, am I worried that our general manager is going to commit a felony? No, I'm not. I'm just not. So, am I worried that our general manager that has been here probably almost as long as I've been on this earth is going to commit misconduct? I'm not at all. So, what it is language that is favorable to the employee in so much that it gives the employee a certain amount of assurance that if there was, I think, an unlikely event, and that there's political motivation to try to, quote, go after the employee, that he has some assurances that he can be confident that he can run the utility in a manner that's free from the tyranny of constantly being threatened to be terminated. There is language in there that says that if there is, I think, conduct that this board feels is insubordinate, that the board can terminate the employee for cause. Now, there's a 30-day period to cure. So if, again, in the unlikely event, and really truly, to be honest, the unforeseeable event that we had a general manager in the future that went rogue, we can terminate that employee. So I feel very comfortable, and even if in the future, if we had an employee that was arrested for some notorious crime, we could go ahead and continue to suspend without pay. He's still employed while we sort these things out. I say all that to say this. The contract, I believe, is favorable to the employee because we need to hire and retain and send good messages that we're going to have continuity and that our talent can be assured that they're not going to get a rogue board and the fear of that. So in asking Greg to look at it, and he has proposed to change the contract from 5 years to 3, and then to change paragraph 3 in section 3 to extend, in the event that there is the death of the manager, the number of months increase from 3 months to 6 for the spouse's medical insurance benefit, which I find to be in line with industry standards. It's not that, it's de minimis to be quite frankly, but I think it's a good gesture for the spouse. And then termination, the changes to mirror the phrases in paragraph 4, because we didn't have personal leave at the time that the contract was negotiated. I want to also note that this contract has been in effect since May 2005. Multiple boards with multiple compositions of the members have approved this without comment. But I felt that it was timely and necessary for us to exercise our fiduciary duties by looking at it and examining it. It's my recommendation that we approve the general manager's employment contract, and I will open this up for a motion to approve so we can get to discussion. Doesn't mean we have to approve it, but
Why do we need to approve it? The contract itself is already renewed by contract.
that is true, but you would be approving the changes.
Oh, okay. Okay. My bad. I agree with that, yeah.
And we don't have to. If you're more comfortable with leaving it at 5 instead of 3, we can discuss. But before we can discuss, we need a motion.
Can we discuss before we have an emotion to
No, you
approve?
can't. Nope.
No. Well, I motion that we approve and then have a discussion.
There's a motion. I hear a second.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second. So discussion. Any discussion?
Two things, two or three things I'll start. As you guys know, I mean, I've been running large I say large. I've had 5 or 6 hospital companies, or hospitals working for me over time. And the compensation to a salaried hospital CEO is high. I mean, it's just what it is. That's what the market is. When you have good people, that's what it takes. When you want to try to take the cheap side of it, and then you tend to, you know, if everybody knows how you buy cars, if you don't want to spend money on a car, you kind of run the risk that the car's not going to last as long as maybe other cars. And so I think when you got two things kind of going. You got you know, somebody that's doing a good job, who's also I'm gonna use his words, been around CUB longer than Zach's been alive. Was that a good way of putting it?
Yes.
And so, you know, unfortunately, as people get more experience in their job and their career, you know, pay rates go up because of time, and that's just part of it. And so, you know, if we were sitting here having a conversation about somebody being difficult or challenging to work with and not doing a good job, and the numbers weren't where you guys had the numbers, and you're part of this too. Okay, it's all of you. Okay, but you know, it's hard for me not to be supportive of that. Typically, I will want to look at a contract before I actually give an opinion on it. That's just a personal deal in terms of it being in writing. But we've got the base contract, and you've outlined the options. But I mean, I just don't. I think things are running well. There would probably be a couple modifications down the road. The comments that you made about not worrying about him going off and doing some crazy stuff, I'd probably want to, when we have a change and we don't know people as well, and the longevity in the community, may want to change those down the road. But
And I agree. I think.
but
I think
I'll shut up. But
that we have a track record,
that's exactly right.
and so
And it's a successful track record.
So some of the contractual language that I wouldn't extend it to the new guy. I just would say that.
Well, I think we all, and that hopefully we all, I mean, that's a new day whenever Greg decides it's time and there's a new person in here, you know, that's the start over on the contract. We shouldn't start with the same one.
I tend to agree. Any other comments, Steve?
Yeah, I read this thing over a couple of times this week before we came down here. We had part of this discussion last year over a bonus versus a base salary increase. The contract guarantees Greg, and I'm not throwing off on Greg. The contract guarantees Greg a cost of living raise without meeting any performance objectives, without meeting any milestones or goals, and maybe the shortcoming is in board for not taking the time to set those and make him understand what we expect for the next year. But the way the contract's written now, he doesn't have to do anything to get his cost of living raise. And I find that unusual in a contract.
You know, from various contracts, I mean, I've had CPI escalators in all kinds of contracts, real estate contracts, leases, and I think you can have that. I think it's, you know, it's kind of a trade-off of how you want to propose it. Yeah, I mean, one could argue, Greg has sat on this side at other meetings that I know he and I have attended together at times before, where, you know, there's a little structure at times how we do it, but this, you know, it's also public utility, and I'm trying to not put all my private equity or private business hat on in the whole setting, but I've seen both, really have, of the escalators, just in what I've done.
Well,
So,
but there is wording in the contract that obligates us to do just that,
Yeah.
to set goals and performance objectives in order to evaluate his performance for the year, and we don't do that.
that's a valid point.
I think some of the things, I'd like to look at them separately, because I think the insurance issue, if something, God forbid, happens and you drop dead, I think we have a moral responsibility to take care of his wife as a board until we can.
I mean, 3 to 6 months is really de minimis.
I know
I've
it's
seen it.
nothing,
It's just-
but
I've
I
seen
know, but that's.
them for life,
Well, I
which is
have
too
two.
much.
I have two.
Too much, I think, but up until Medicare age or whatever, but
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't.
Well, I think we could probably all agree on that real quick, that specific thing, which is just so minimal, but, it has worked for a long time, and we have a track record with somebody who has done a phenomenal job. If he didn't, then, you know, the conversation here tonight would be very different. And like Steve said, you know, whenever a new person comes on board and you decide you want to retire, you know, that's a whole new contract. So
Right.
we can come back with that then. So I'd like to ask Greg's opinion, if that's, Mr. Chairman, if that would be, can we hear from him? Is
We
that-
can, but before we do, I wanted to get the board's opinion on, I mean, would you rather see it 5 years than 3?
Why are we looking at decreasing it anyway? I mean, what's,
It was just an item to talk about and discuss. Just because the motion has been made, we don't have to approve the motion. If we're happy with 5, if 5 years, which
I mean, this is a right to work state anyway. I mean, he can terminate his employment at any time.
at any time, correct.
Or we could with cause, so
Right.
that's,
Correct.
Well, his contract lets him do that. He can give us 90 days notice and be out here.
So it may be much ado about nothing, and we should perhaps think about whatever this board, I wanna know what the board's comfortable with. I'm comfortable with a 5-year contract.
Well, let me 2 questions, I guess. One is, 3 or 5 doesn't matter to me. I was more thinking, I didn't know if there was something going on. It's like Greg may only work 3 more years and decide he wants to go to the house. That's kind of what I was assuming, but that was a bad assumption on my part. But I'm kind of open that that part doesn't matter to me, whatever it works. What actually catches my attention more is, I assume somewhere along the line, the board chairman would have some kind of annual performance discussion with the general manager. I mean, we all should expect that in any of our jobs, but
Since I've been on the board, we've never sat down as a group and tried to define goals and objectives for the following year for Greg.
however, there have been many times where we've asked Greg to do things and he's done them. We just didn't put it as a goal, but.
That's different.
Well, well, let's do that now. What would you propose? I mean, so I would say be successful, make money, stay out of trouble, don't cause any litigation, operate safely. I mean, a lot of this is common sense. I mean, I think you look at the numbers and the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, what else would you want him to do? By the way, rip up the policies, get somewhat caught unawares at a board meeting. We're going to go this whole new direction and do it exactly what we asked. I mean,
Steve 3, if I can call you that. From your background, what would you normally expect goals and objectives to evaluate an employee? What's the general rule when you lay those out?
You know, when you get up to the executive level, you know, the goals of an executive in this case would be, it's pretty much I would think it'd be pretty much bottom line driven as much as anything else.
But should they not still be definable and measurable? They should
In our
not be so
business,
subjective that you don't really know if he's done what you wanted or didn't do or twice as much.
Well, you know, I can, in our old business, yes, we had definable goals, you know, and a lot of times our bonuses and things at work were dependent upon us being able to reach certain milestones. Well, kind of the way I see it in here right now is we're seeing the milestones, you know, each meeting. We're seeing what the company's accomplishing each meeting, what they're projecting to do and where we stand. And, you know, is it really necessary for us to come to a one-time meeting a year, you know, to discuss where he's at in his job performance? I think right now in just my 2 meetings, I mean, we're seeing monthly definition of job goals. I mean, it's laid out right in front of us on the board.
I mean, I just, from my perspective, again, I had 6 of those guys reporting to me. I do quality, I do ops, I do finance, I do satisfaction, however you want to define that, whether it's employee sat, community sat, et cetera, whatever that is. And I'd probably have some community goals around that as well. I agree with you 100%. The numbers tell you that all that stuff's working, okay? And moving in the right direction. I think the other thing is because we just approved the budget, it's kind of hard to go back and go, hey, whoops, hey, we'd like to come back and revisit the budget. Maybe it needs to be a little bit higher for next year or a little bit less, you know? And so I think maybe one goal should be for this board some point going into maybe next year is maybe we ought to think about that in advance. Say, March or April as part of the budgeting and planning process for the next upcoming year to build that in going forward. But yeah, I mean, as a CEO, my board reviewed me too. I mean, I sat down and had conversations, but it is looser sometimes when you get to the level and things are going well. People, it's like, hey, keep it up. I don't want to screw anything up in the process either. So.
And the reason I'm harping, we debated last year and struggled and I think failed, trying to decide whether we give Greg a 2% or 3% above cost of living base pay raise, or we define what turns out to be a bonus based on what he has accomplished for the year. And I thought we committed last year to look into that for the next salary cycle to see if we could define some things that would let us more appropriately evaluate a bonus for Greg.
I think what you're getting at is, instead of it being all art, have a little more science. And instead of having some sort of navigational posts for us to arrive at a decision, because we're talking about two different things. We're talking about a contract, and we've brought in the discussion of merit and performance raises or bonuses, which is not really what we can take that up now since the group's talking about it.
But that's in the contract.
Yes, and that part, but I mean, as you've said, I mean, that's,
So right now, and I apologize for not looking at it, is there a no bonus now? And there is a pay raise? A cost of
so
living?
there is a cost of living
I
in
apologize.
the contract that's tied to, and I've seen that and whether it's schools or city managers or others, it's not that uncommon one way or the other. So it's not an outlier, like nobody in the history of the utility space has that. But I get your point. I'm comfortable with the way it is. I don't have a problem with it. In what way would you envision given a cost benefit, a cost of living allowance, and the general manager not getting the cost of living allowance?
Well, if I went to Greg and said, Greg, give me the 5 things you want to accomplish next year, and how are we going to know whether you accomplish them or not? And at the end of the year, if we look at those and say, he didn't do any of those, then I would question
Give me an
bonus.
example, like running a good utility and revenues would be one of the things I would say. I mean, what is it in your head that you think are these things that we ought to be measuring that we're not?
Well, things that Greg directly has an impact on whether they are successful or happen or don't happen or we accomplish. The fact that we make twice as much money because it got so hot we sell so much electricity, that's not Greg. That's the weather.
But conversely, if we lost revenue because it was mild, that's not Greg's fault either.
Absolutely agree. And that probably shouldn't be something that we use to evaluate his performance. But I don't, his relationship with TVA, his relationship with the city or Anderson County, the things that he may or may not do to enhance the way this organization works, retention of employees.
We could measure retention, but I don't think we could measure the level of relationships. Is that, how would you even word that as far as with TVA or with the city?
Well, and Greg knows a whole lot more about his involvement with TVA and various other boards and organizations than I do. He knows his involvement. I don't know whether you have goals in mind with those various other things that you participate in, or what you want to accomplish next year, what you would like to see you be able to affect and make happen.
I'm going to respond as soon as the chairman gives me leave to do that.
Yeah,
So I'm holding my powder, as they say,
yeah,
just a little.
well, I want to say this. I've been in this room and I've seen this room get personal and it's not going to get personal with me holding this gavel, and I don't think you are, Steve, at all. there's a tension that exists always between a board and those that we govern. And it needs to be a healthy tension because tough questions have to be asked. And I want those questions to be asked, though, in the spirit of trying to get better and not getting personal. And I don't think we are, and I don't think you are.
No, I'm not trying to be
So
personal.
I don't think you are either. And so with those words, General Manager, your responses or your thoughts or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it's, recently, over the recent years, this has always been a tension and moment, but in 35 years, it hasn't been. It's never been a tension at this time of the year. I'll address first the contract on the term. The governor, through the state, has provided a provision for utility managers to be up to 5 years, which is really where that went down to. They recognize a 5-year contract because that attracts and retains, specifically because of the commitment that the professional makes to the community. I'm going to now move my family, I'm going to raise my children. This is going to be part of not only my career, but also my life. And we make that, and we need a long-term comfortability to do that. Other than Dudley, not personal, but 7 professional engineers that I have, some of the top echelon in my cadre, and both of my other directors, none of them are local. In order to get that level of professionalism in here, we have to give them a level of assurance that and I can name, and so can they, the utilities that they would never work at because of the politics involved. So the contract gives not only the general manager a sense of stability, but it also provides levels as it ripples down through the professional organization. They want to know that an election going the wrong way is we're not going to look like Anderson County Courthouse over there, where many times there's a turnaround. So in terms of the contract, in terms of the longevity of that contract, that's really the push for why we're looking at that. Now, no professional should want to or would work for any board that his services weren't appreciated. Who would want to do that? Especially when there's tremendous other options out there to do that. All of that's great. So when it is weighted towards the employee, that's for a good reason. A contract should never enter into any it's in terms of decision or benefit. It should be neutral and neutered, because you work and you retire and the contract means nothing. And for the 15 years, well, I'll back up a little bit, because of the last few years hasn't been that way, but for the first 12 anyway, it was never an issue, because neither the board nor the general manager had ever an issue. I mean, some didn't even know that there was a contract. I couldn't have told you what the contract said. But as the political winds changed, then everybody became, that was the number, that was like Gone with the Wind. It was a bestseller list. I mean, I was dishing copies out here like playing cards, because all of a sudden, And it got down to the employee level because they all knew. And they all knew this day was coming. And they're going to be watching this. And just let me say, all is good. All is good. We've got a great relationship. The board and myself, we're all good. And this is a good conversation, and it's a good discussion, and it's all done, and we're all happy about it. So there is no tension between us. And I want to make that clear because it does make a difference to our folks. So and we talked about a 3, and that is a nod to someone that has or had problems with a contract that had so many protections for the general manager. You want to get rid of me sooner? There is no current intentions for me to retire. Yeah, I don't have that at all. I mean, the Lord could take me in about 5 minutes if he wanted to, but that's my intention, nor there's a 3-year level or anything like that. As long as I'm younger than the president or the potential president, I'm thinking I'm just a kid. So there is nothing magical about the 3 or 5 year deal. I think that when you get, and I hope to be helping you when the transition comes, I'll help you write a contract that will reflect what the board is most comfortable with, but you're going to need to make that 5 years. I'll just tell you that right now. You'll need to give that assurance to the professional that you have coming in to do that. Now, shifting gears on the performance. I have a performance evaluation, all of my people. Not for my directors. We have conversation, which is different. I have, and you've seen copies of them, and we put it out, and it lists many of these performance things at the highest echelon, and certainly at the CEO position. And I don't know wherever atmosphere that you all come from, whether that's in that CEO position at a level of this company. I don't know where he is on the performance, but certainly there are always conversations. I would suggest that we've had a lot of conversations. I know you and I have, but I'm saying this board with the general manager has had a lot of conversations. What I provide you every month is in my opinion, speaks to the performance of what we do. The presentations that I try to give you, the uniqueness that we have, all of those things are part, and for me, they would be part of the evaluation process. I serve on boards today about the community, and about what I do, which I don't get paid for anywhere, but it's part of my commitment to the greater good for the greater community. That's what I do, both locally, both regionally, and both valley-wide of what I do. So all of that is time and commitment that I do because I think it's part of the responsibility that I have as your CEO representing Cub. So when you say, what do you want to do? And as you look out, I am constantly doing that. Much of what we do is to maintain what we have, but we bring you new things all the time about things that are being done, which is different than what you would ask a customer service representative whether or not they're going to be more familiar with the CSA metering process. You say that is you're now responsible to learn this, to get your CDL within 3 months. To me, that's a measurable goal. Did you do that? Yes. Did you do that? No. I don't know if you do that at a CEO level. I would think that I don't have conversations with them every month or have a performance time to where I value what they do every month. Where we have let you down, I haven't heard a lot of that, about what we do, and I always want to exceed. not meet, but exceed. And what I provide you and the information when you ask for it, that's all part of, is it correct? Is it timely? And it is specific to what I've asked for. And to me, that would be part of my evaluation process. Now, in terms of rate, in terms of salary, if you want me to move
Yeah, sure.
into
I think
that,
it's appropriate.
I've told this board, and I've told recent boards, I don't consider myself an average player, a unique, satisfactory employee. I pride myself on always bringing into the utility, and I have tried to demonstrate that, factual with data backing it up, the contribution individually that I make, not anybody else, but my individual contribution, and then collectively, the team's contribution, and then we looked just last month at $30+ million, how that rolled out. And then I went through my individual, and I think that was over $12 million, that I brought in, that we could account for what I brought to the table. I always want to put in more to a company, and you should put in more than you take out, or they don't need you, and you're not needed. I think that I have demonstrated that and will continue to demonstrate that. So when you talk about, and I provided you information on this, and I suggest that you look on the internet. You can always find somebody making less money. I mean, you don't have to look far either for that. But I can show you people at 30,000 electric customers, no water and sewer, that are making $400,000, period. So we can find others that are doing that. All I said from the very get-go, from the time that we started talking about this, I don't want to be at whatever standard adjustment is. That's what my contract says. That is my minimum. And I hope we're not down to minimums. And all I want is a nod, because it's the message, and it's the message I give my top people. You're not an average. You're above average, and that above average commands more. Now, whether that be in a bonus or whether that be, and I always say, give me 5%, because it's, or 2% above whatever the average is. And that's the message it's sending me. And I mean, and that's I don't know, $5,000 or $6,000. You break that down to a month of $500 a month. If that's a message that you don't want to send me, I'm just surprised, because of what we've been able to demonstrate. So that's where I'm at on both salary and on contract.
I think I understand where Steve One is coming from, is that he's articulating, like, is there ways that we can have measurable so it's not subjective to the board and we're grabbing numbers out of the air. Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? But have some way to maybe it is 4, 3 plus 4 instead of 3 plus 2. Maybe it is more, and having ways. I just don't know how to articulate those other than the conversations I have with the general manager, the interactions we have together collectively as a board, and those that I have individually in the time that I spend with him on other boards as well, whether it's ACETA, whether it's his involvement with, I think, helping and steer and guide the future of Bull Run Steam Plant, plus a plethora of other things that are hard to capture. Whether it was when I asked him to interface with local government about best practices we're doing with COVID, and an email went out, and I got feedback from county and other leaders, and not just this county, and so it was appreciated, those communications. I've seen an improvement in the way that our city manager and the general manager work together. I see a bright, partnership, a bright future of that partnership with what's gonna happen down on Market Street and Main Street. And I've seen all that. I've asked Greg about a succession plan privately, and, he's working hard to make sure these next 5 to 10 years is gonna be a significant transition, not only for this utility board, but also for our community, as we have leaders going out and retiring and young leaders coming in, and it's so critical that we have the right succession plans in place for a lot of the organizations that I'm involved in. And I'm deeply satisfied. I guess when my standards, and it is subjective, Steve, and I struggle with the same things you talk about. It, in my mind, is it meets or exceeds, and it's based off of the numbers that we get presented. It's based off of the talent that we've retained. It's based off of the feedback I get from the community. It's based off of his ability to put this residential development guidelines together, what we've asked. It's based off of his professionalism. And some of those, it's hard to quantify. Some of those, it's hard to measure. How do you measure professionalism? How do you, and you can say, and I've had people ask, well, I expect him to be professional. I agree, but in the world, does he exceed that in how you define it as a board member? And I think each board member, that's why we vote, and that's why we all voice our opinions, and we should have this. I do agree that in the Marine Corps, we don't give out medals for just showing up. We expect that's part of your job, right?
That's
part
right.
of your job as a Marine is to grab a rifle and go into enemy fire. So you don't necessarily get, a medal or citation for returning fire under fire, because that's what you're sort of trained to do. However, if you're an exceptional individual, you will get awarded, and you will. And so I know there's a tension between how much is this expected, this is your job, and then how much is he going above and beyond and exceeding those expectations? Steve?
To use your analogy, let me clarify something first. I'm not about trying to reduce, lower, minimize, or take away from Greg anything that's due to Greg. I think my struggle is, how do we define how much we pay Greg for his services? Your Marine that charges the enemy line, he just doesn't get a medal because he raises his hand. There's a review board that sits down and looks at what he did, how he did it, when he did it, what were the circumstances, and defines what he gets as far as a medal. And that's kind of what if we just asked Greg to come in sometime of the year, once a year, and just try to delineate to us the things he thinks he's done, accomplished, moved forward on the past year, and give us the ability to grab those things and say, hey, wow, Greg needs 3% plus 5%.
Right.
I just don't feel like I've got that right now.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak?
Yeah, you recognize.
I've worked with Greg a long time, and he's a unique individual. I assure you that, and I'm sure every one of you all realize that. He is very unique, and I know managers at other utilities, you got one there you want to keep, I'm telling you that. He's going to be here long after I'm gone, I know that. But what scares me is when I hear the set goals and things like that. He has goals every night. He comes in the morning, he's got something he wants to do. He's not going to wait until next year and say, I want to do that next year. He comes in and says, let's get on that. And that's why every month you see these things that we do. And that's why, the 2 minutes and 40 seconds on the Oliver Springs outage, that's pretty hard to improve on. We ain't going to make it 1 minute and give him a bonus on that. This right here, Jeff Lash, been in TVA's chair like 2 weeks. He comes out here, meets with Greg, talks about what can we do. Greg pushes this because Greg has been pushing this, I know, for 10 years or more to get some sort of long-term partnership agreement in with TVA to solidify TVA from being sold. He's fought that, and made people mad over there over it. But when Lash came in, Greg got to him, and that's why this exists. And if you look at the very first person that signed this long-term partnership agreement, it was Greg Fay sitting there. He signed that. That's $855,000 this year that this utility has gained because he helped push that through. Now, he can't do that every year. It took him 10 years to do that. You can't expect him to improve a great system, which we have proven with the VPP, the residential development policies, this partnership credit, the FLISR. And I'm afraid when you start tying it to numbers, and I'm not gonna be here much longer, I tell you, because I'm looking to retire. I like golf. But when you start tying it to numbers, if you're not careful, like in a private industry, sales or expenses, then all of a sudden numbers want to get manipulated and in the gray areas, and that scares me. Look at ask the Haslams about doing stuff like that. What happened over there to Pilot? You have to be careful when you start saying, we're gonna base it on this number or that number. You got to be careful with that.
Thank you, that's well put.
Yeah, let me
Steve,
clarify,
too?
let me clarify, because I was doing it as a reward for Greg. In my world, we have base comp, we have a cost of living adjustment, and then what happens is and in this situation, as opposed to walking in and you got I won't use, okay, you think about this. When you have a bad situation, I was about to go to, in a bad situation, then you have things to improve on. In this situation, it may actually be, hey, we want the status quo because it is going great. And in exchange for that, I'm willing to add on above what you would normally get because you are keeping it right down the straight and narrow where we want it. So from my perspective, I saw that as a positive. I'm sorry if it came out negative. I didn't mean it that way. But I also think, going kind of to what Greg said earlier, I want that carrot, when you get to that chair, the carrot's there regardless of the funds, but I also don't want to have not enough there to make sure that the carrot's not starting to shrink. And I know what you said. I've been there. I know exactly what you're saying. And so for me, it's a matter of, I want to keep rewarding. And as a matter of fact, when it's running really great, it may be, hey, just do exactly what you did last year and keep us in exactly the right direction. And by golly, we're going to give you a kicker for that. And with that, and I think, so I'm trying to blend what Steve said, which is, hey, the performance is kind of tied to goals, but the goals may be, hey, just keep it in the road like it is, and it's wonderful. And by golly, at the end, next year, there's going to be another boost that really may not be talking about a cost of living adjustment. I saw that as an add-on when I see it. Now, that may not be common inside of the general manager. I bet some of them have those. I know TVA does at that level. I saw it as a positive. Let me tell you, I think this thing's on the right ship and it's going the right way totally. I don't want to give any misconceptions about that, okay? But I think I saw it as an add-on to help reward him, whoever else, for the good work.
Madam
That's how I
Vice,
saw it.
thank you.
Just to add to what everybody else has said, I feel like that when I come to a board meeting each month, that it is like a mini evaluation because we hear what's going on, we hear what he's accomplished. And when we say he, it's CUB as a
Yeah.
whole because he is the leader of that. So when we hear all these great and wonderful things, we are hearing what he has accomplished. So I don't know that just a meeting once a year to sit down to go over everything that we've already heard serves any other purpose. But the other thing is, I was kind of looking around to see, Steve, you may, but I've worked for a board before, just like Greg has. Do you work for a board or you? Okay.
Several.
Okay, well, I'm not sure the rest of you have.
Yeah.
But when you do that, it's a little bit different than trying to pull numbers to meet goals. It's just a little bit different. And, to me, last year we did a 5% raise, I believe, and it would be very difficult. We did that because we thought he did a great job last year, which he did. And
2% over the cost of living.
Yeah, cost of living plus 2, but it
Yeah.
came out to
Came
5.
out of that, yeah.
But if we say this year, we're only gonna do the cost of living, that's 3, overall. So we're saying you're doing even a better job. You're meeting expectations and exceeding expectations. However, we're not gonna do as much of a bonus or a raise, excuse me. I have a moral hard
I
time.
don't think anybody's
to-
saying that.
Well, when it comes down to money on a piece of paper, that's what we're saying. So
Well-
I don't want to do that. I think he is meeting and exceeding.
I don't know about you guys, at my age, when I come in here 6 months from now, am I gonna remember everything we've heard the last 6 meetings and be able to pull together an overall idea about all the things that Greg has accomplished the last year? I can't do that. It'd be nice for me to have a little bit of refresher on all the things that we've gotten done.
And what I'm hearing you say, so correct me if I'm wrong, is just you want some sort of actionable items or navigational posts that you can tie it to. So,
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Again, I think I would be comfortable if we just sit down with Greg once a year and reviewed everything that's happened in the last year. What we accomplished.
I think it comes every month. Yeah, I think maybe what Steve's saying is, or at least would help me, is prior to the end of the year, because I think you do, you stage, I know when we used to do board meetings, everything was kind of, we're gonna do this month, this next month, this the following month, and so it's kind of staged out so we don't end up in a 4-hour meeting or 12-hour meeting one night. And so what it might be good is like in April or May, to pull that one summary document, 2-page document, 1-page document, whatever, going towards the end of the fiscal year, and just stick it in a packet so it's a refresher. That might suffice. Because it's our running list, and everybody's got everything going on, and that might be just a reminder of all the stuff that's going. I know you do, and I'm not.
I'm the king of PowerPoints.
I
I
know
just
you
want
are.
to remind everybody that.
Do your
everyone's
PowerPoint.
asked for.
But that might be is kind of when we get close to the end of fiscal year, that 10th month, go, hey, this is kind of all stuff we've done this year. We say we're going to do kind of, hey, that might be a way to do it too.
Well,
Without
yeah.
having to do a full, I wouldn't do a PowerPoint, I'd just do a Word document, just said, hey, here's the 10 things.
It would help me decide whether we give him 3% plus 2 or 3% plus 10, because he's done all these great things
Right.
this year.
What is the appropriate, would this be appropriate if in April, Greg scheduled a one-on-one with the board members, each one-on-one? And you sit down, block out 30 minutes of your day or an hour, and sit down with Greg and talk to Greg about, out of the purview of the other board members, of what your expectations are. Is he meeting them? And then gives Greg an opportunity to do that reminder with you in a one-on-one session that I think sometimes can be very productive. I want to make sure that's.
I would be happy to do that anytime.
I'm pretty
he has.
sure that's
he has.
allowable. That's not a problem.
He sat down with all of us probably individually, I know he has with me.
As long as you don't make any decisions, you can make.
Right.
And we
But
want to.
I think that those conversations, and maybe that becomes a best practice, every April, we all sit down, one-on-one, Greg will schedule it, we come in, have a cup of coffee, and it's a cordial, information sharing, and then that gives you, because I think it's fair, absolutely, Steve, to say, hey, I forget things. We went over things, and in September, now it's June, and I'm making a decision, and it may be to his detriment that I don't recall what we did in September, right?
Or something we put in place in January doesn't pan out like we thought it did. And it would help me as a steward of the citizens' money, understand how much we need to remunerate Greg for his efforts.
Yeah, and I'm not hearing that I don't hear criticism. I hear that you're trying to improve a process.
Yeah, and the contract does call for that.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's the proposal on the table?
Well, we're all over the place at this point.
What was in the motion?
So the motion was essentially to change it from 5 to 3, which I'm against at this point. And then, to tie in the death of the manager, increase, the medical insurance benefits from 3 to 6. And, because of that, language change also of small little, personal leave was not considered in the event of termination. So, really, at this point, my feeling, this is discussion, my feeling is I'm in favor of dismissing the motion and then moving forward with the discussion about just the spouse, or amend the motion to only include the language of the spouse. I'm fine with 5 years. I'm hearing Steve's fine with 5 years. Steve too.
Yeah.
So I think that was a gesture by the general manager to show some good faith of like, hey, I want to work with you guys. I want to alleviate anything that, if anybody has any concerns, but I think 5 years is right. I feel comfortable with 5 years. I think Steve's point of let's make sure that we have an evaluation. We can do that and do that in April and do that in a one-on-one session that will also probably encourage some candor and there's things that he and I talk about, and it's refreshing to be able to just one-on-one sometimes, and implement that as a best policy going forward. Then, when we get to other business, I think that's where we're gonna talk about compensation or recognizing pay. Does everybody follow?
So you're doing that separate?
Yes, that's gonna be a separate
Okay.
issue in other business.
Okay, I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
there's two things we need to change. We need to add a word, and we need to add, go from 3 to 6 on insurance.
Yes.
So there's two,
And keep it at 5.
yeah, but that hadn't changed if we,
Right.
okay,
Correct.
yeah.
So, did I hear a motion to amend to reflect that?
I make that motion.
Okay.
I'll say.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All right, so now, all we're gonna vote on at this point is to change the spousal benefits from 3 to 6. We're keeping the contract at 5 years, and then we're gonna change that one paragraph that didn't include, in the original writing of the contract, didn't address personal leave. Everybody clear? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Any opposed? Just wanna make sure I didn't catch that. All right. So motion to approve. Did you catch that, Dudley? Okay.
Good.
Roger that. Now, we'll move on to other business. And
Yes,
this
sir.
is when we'll talk about compensation, COLA, and all that good stuff.
Well, if it's all right, I'm gonna get rid of this other business first, and
Yes,
that
sir.
way we'll end with that, when we're all feeling good. I received a letter from the Sierra Club, and in this letter, they've requested that we support customers during this pandemic. And I was happy to write a letter back saying how pleased we were to be doing that. I talked to them about Project Assist, and then we put $400,000 into aid to stressed families in ADFLAC. And then here most recently, we, along with TVA, matched their contribution of $10,000, so that would have been another $20,000 plus to our local agency to help support those in need across our county. And we've received emails back from folks that didn't even participate in some of this ability to defer their utility payments, and we're thankful for being the type of utility that would champion that. So very good about that. Monday, I was asked by our county mayor to represent on a webcam with Senator Blackburn. And they had some councilmen on, not councilmen, but they had some county commissioners on that call. And I was able to speak for the group Oak Ridge was also represented on that. And one of the things I asked about is for monies to be made available to utilities that kept their employment full-time. There's a lot of stimulus money out there for first responders. Utilities were left off of that, and I was assured that the utility, that she was going to address that to the White House. And we're now hoping to see some funds available for that. Yesterday, I was asked by TVA to come to Bull Run, and we met with the mayors of Oak Ridge, the county commission, the county mayor, the mayor of Norris, and I think some others were invited on county commission in order for TVA to give an update. I had met with TVA privately twice in the vision for the economic development for what was going to go on at Bull Run. Bob Ducey was there, who is he's charged with the decommissioning of that, and he recognized me and asked me to speak to the crowd, which I did, and told them how much I appreciated TVA's transparency and their communication, the fact that they're listening to us. I have renderings. They're going to bring a rendering by, with the water intake there. I'm very excited about potentially looking at data centers, going in. We've identified areas for solar, walking tracks and everything else, even a place where the crew through Oak Ridge could tie up on that island out there. Really nice stuff, and TVA committed to me. Bradley was there, my good friend, John Bradley, who was over all of the economic development for TVA, and we talked about site selection and that TVA would pay for the cost of a site selector to try to market this to a big, we'd like a Facebook, we'd like a Google. We've got over 200 acres. I'm trying to look to see if we can get more than that for diversity in the industry. So all of that went very well, and I think I talked with the Tracy Wandell and Chuck Fritz, both represented there in Claxton. They were there. They're very much on board with this. This cap and seal in that fly ash is an important part, and I'm also in negotiations with TDEC because we like approval on that, so we can get some movement going. Very excited about how that's going down. That was yesterday. I also last week received a call from Dan Pratt, who is the vice president of TVA, and they asked me to be on TVA's steering committee to help them better interface with the public in the 7 states. And I've already given them some more than they wanted to hear about what I've already made suggestions, and apparently that's rippled down because the 2 vice presidents were at Bull Run yesterday, referenced what I told in that steering committee. So all of that's going good. So I'm going to be part of that ongoing with TVA. I have some good news about the grant. You remember last year we applied for an ARC grant because we're trying to get some money, some help, anything we can, so we can get a water line up to the I-75 Industrial Park, and then everything on that corridor can be served with CUB water. We don't have anything on the other side of the river, and that we estimate the cost to be almost $2.4 million. The EDA grant was an 80-20 grant, which meant that we had to fund. The ARC grant was $500,000. So Cub's contribution would have been $2.4 million. Total project's $2.9 million. With all of this stimulus money out there, and I give hats off to our director, Greg Jones, and Mitch Loomis, who is with East Tennessee Development District. Mitch is a real support for what we're trying to do. Mitch has put in for an EDA grant, and that EDA grant is an 80-20 going our way, which means we would have gone from being liable for 2.4 of the 2.9 million to where now it's 593,000, and we wouldn't have to borrow money for that hit. So we are now in the second stage on that. If you remember, we didn't get past the first door in the RC grant. Now we're already in the second door of the EDA grant. And what I'll be asked to do, and I have confidence that you all will agree, is that I'm going to have to guarantee that we'll fund the 593,000 with a letter committing Cub to the 593, assuming we get to 2,372,000, from EDA. So we're very excited about that and very hopeful, because a lot of that money is going around. And finally, Dudley, if you don't care to hand these out, you should have some right there. Our chairman has asked me to prepare a presentation for the city, because there are still some lingering questions about what we've done for residential development. And I prepared this booklet for them and a full PowerPoint presentation, but it contains the guide for electric and the guide for water, and also the handouts in that. And then I've got a full section that has all of the slides of the PowerPoint presentation. And then in that PowerPoint presentation, I have a breakout PowerPoint, should the questions asked, of how does the rebate infrastructure and off-site improvements work. In other words, how do we get, now that we've instituted a rebate program and we've also instituted improvements to infrastructure in order to reach your subdivision, how does all that work? That's in a separate section, should there be interested in that. It's rather long, so I pulled it out. And then also the question that they had, because they're familiar with, is the process that we went through in the evaluation of the Keene pumps and why that didn't make it on the list. Because apparently there were lingering questions on that. That presentation is in here also, and it was embedded in the PowerPoint presentation. And should anyone have a question about that, I was prepared to answer it, but we've also got hard copies in this. I've got that worked up and ready to go, and I can offer that to any board member or group, and I'm prepared to stay here this evening to show it to you if you want it to, but that will complement what this booklet says, and I think it's, I even have clips of what Mr. Hollingsworth had to say at that podium, how appreciative he was, and the fact that we made huge adjustments, and it made a great difference, and he thanked us more than once. So I didn't want the city folks to have that without you having a copy, and I think it's Zach's intention to give that to them at the next city council meeting, so that way you'll have a copy. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Greg,
Sir.
this effort was a tremendous effort to respond to the community around us.
Yes.
And some of the criticisms they have and some of the issues.
That's correct.
And I think we did a good job with it, or you did. Do we have a feel yet for how that
Yes.
has changed?
Well, yes. The answer to your question is yes. This week, Christy Hicks, who is a real good developer, of course, Lynn Duncan has been very positive. Ms. Hicks, who has not traditionally been a big supporter, she is now preparing to give us a check because she is ready to start her subdivision. I think she'll begin either later this week or next week, and I think that's 56 units in 2 phases that she's putting in up there, and I think a good word is enthusiastic. We've had nothing but a positive interaction with her. So, and I think she's also maybe voiced that.
Yeah, discussions I've had with her,
Right.
she has been very complimentary and very enthusiastic, I think, about the changes, and I think the overall, I don't know if it's an attitude shift, but I think it was a gesture, is beyond the actual policies. I think it was the the gesture that we made as a utility board, the message that it sent, that we want to do something to help you, and we weren't tone deaf. And so those are the messages that I've heard from her and from some others. Is everybody happy? I don't know that you ever make everybody happy, but I think that this board heard a message. We responded. We gave the general manager direction. He took it, and in some ways, some of the things that I was asking for, he saved me from myself. And I think that's responsible for him to do. What I want to ask this board is, if you can, the next city council meeting, which I think is the 29th, I'll send out an email tomorrow morning. I'd like, if you can, please attend, because I'm going to hand this out to every single city council member and the mayor and the city manager. And I'm not going to go and overwhelm them, because we're going to be talking about our own budget. But I really, in particularly our little pamphlets, because I think it's a powerful, powerful visual, and there's a lot of information in here for them. And I also probably will hand deliver one to the Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Rick Meredith, because part of our job too is we have to promote the utility, and we have to represent as board members what the utility's doing. We have to correct misconceptions that may still exist and still permeate in this community of what CB does or doesn't do. It's amazing to me, and I know Steve and I both have seen it, how much, well, have you talked to Greg about that? Well, I didn't go to Greg. We'll pick up the phone, and issues got solved, right? And so I think that's a continuation. So the next city council meeting, if you guys could just attend, and I'm going to ask during my portion, anyone has anything to say, and you might not have anything to say, I'm going to ask that you have an opportunity to come to the podium and comment on anything that in my report, and then you can quietly leave. My report's at the beginning, so after we're done, you can quietly get up and exit unless you want to stick
Zach, do you
around.
want me to be there?
If you would like, certainly. I think
That's what Nancy says. You can take the trash out if you like.
The one thing I want to probably at some point go over that PowerPoint with the city manager. I think it's too much information at a city council meeting.
Yes, sir.
That I want it to have maximum impact, and with all the information a lot of times that we receive at city council, it may not have the desired effect that I want.
That's really why.
Yeah, I agree. Any thoughts or?
Personal opinion, the reputation that CUB had for a while that was so negative, I think is one of those things where it started with one person and he told somebody else, and it blossomed, because folks like to hear bad news, I think. It would be nice if we could co-op the Christy Hicks of the world and a few other people to start spreading that information in the other direction.
I think they are. She reached out to me, and I think that developers talk to each other, and how is it working with CUB on that project? And so I think that will happen organically. I do, and I agree it has to be other people as well as just. Of course, you'd say that you're on the board, Of course, you. But I agree. Any other comments to my comments? Okay, General Manager, let's take up an issue of what we were discussing earlier, and I want to bring this up about compensation for our General Manager. Does anybody have a proposal or thoughts, or I'm going to turn it over to Madam Vice. Madam Vice, what is yours?
Well, we kind of blended the two conversations earlier, but I have a hard time saying that he did a great job last year, so we did a 3 + 2 = 5. And this year, he's done a great job. I mean, we've been through the COVID and all that, and now we want to stick at just 3. I really have a problem with that. I think, and I hear what
I
you're
don't think
saying.
anybody said that.
I know, but
I
what
don't
I'm
think
saying.
that's been
Okay,
proposed.
I don't want to go down from last year.
Okay.
I will do it that way. I want to meet last year or go higher. I hear what you're saying. It's just hard on the night that we make this vote happen to start talking about what we need to do. But I think we resolved that issue. We're going to do a one-on-one. So my thinking is a bonus doesn't go into retirement. And that's not figured in retirement. So if we do a raise, then that's going to be reflected in his retirement. And I think he's closer to retirement than he is to the day he started work. So I don't want us to mess up his retirement whenever that is. So that's just my input into that.
Okay.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you have something else?
No, it's all right. We had this discussion last year, we just never got back to it.
Yeah, we did.
So, is that in the form of a motion?
I want to hear everybody's input, and then I think we need to make a motion.
Okay. Well, I'm going to break Robert's Rules of Order, and we're going to talk about what other people's thoughts.
Well,
Steve 3, the new one on the block.
All these Steves.
well, first of all, I feel kind of, this is unusual for me to have the person sitting in the room.
Yes.
You know, to be sitting going over a person's money situation, raise and everything with them sitting, you know, I think we have, you know, a pretty comfortable idea of what he's accomplished over these last few years. But, you know, I'm not really for sure of the structure right now that we're really talking about to start forward with, Zach. Are we talking about a cost of living plus a merit increase to go along with
I think,
this?
so what Madam Vice was saying was that we want to do what we did last year at a minimum, which was 2% over the cost of living, which I think this year cost of living, Greg, was
3.
3. So you would be looking at a net of 5, which is what we did last year. And it's difficult. I think of all people on this board, you're probably in the most difficult seat because you're going off of 60 days of information, and you're asked to make a decision and cast a vote on.
Well, let me ask this question. What were the other employees at CUB? What were their increases figured into the budget this year? What kind of increases were they?
We increased the top out by 3% on the top out, but most aren't topped out, and it depends on their
On their
merit.
merit increase? So you raised your grade levels 3% is what you're saying.
Yes.
So 3% is probably the average. then.
Correct. So, and I'm gonna take liberties here. There's some employees that probably got more than that. Correct, Greg?
Absolutely.
So, you know, giving him 3% would be essentially saying that Greg's average. That's my words, not yours, but I think that's a perception that it could say, but.
Well, in a previous life, you know, an average employee could still get more than the 3% cost of living adjustment. You know, depending on their meritus, where they stood in their midpoint, and how far they advanced. So, you know, just looking at it, you know, from my standpoint, you know, I don't know where Greg is on his midpoint, you know, where he is, or if he even has a midpoint at an executive level. But, you know, I would feel comfortable with a 3.5 or a 4 on top of the 3,
Okay.
you know, to go with that.
Steve, clap, Steve 2.
Uh,
And you don't have to voice your opinion. I'm not calling
what
anybody.
stopped me so far?
Okay.
No, I mean, I can support anything north of 5 between, and I could go to 6 to 7. I don't have a problem with that. And then, let me tell you why. I think to be able to keep and part of it goes back to that whole trying to get the numbers and keep them where they were this last year. I think we've been in something nobody's ever seen. It's been awful easy for businesses to fall off the table and close. Okay, and these guys, and through Greg to Dudley to everybody else, you know, all the way down the staff, these folks have kept it in the road, and Greg's been the captain of the ship. And so I would have no problem going in that 6.5% range. What'd you call it, 6 total?
6.5 to 7.
I can do 6.5.
Okay.
And basically because steering it through the ship the whole way, keeping us out of the ditch during this thing, and I think there's this whole kind of being ahead of it, and you know, I can do it.
I think we had a February meeting, I think it was February, might have been the March one, but Steve Combs brought it up before. I mean, it was almost, he was a prophet. He said, what are we gonna do when this hits our ratepayers, and what relief are we prepared to give for our ratepayers? And I was a little dismissive at that point in time because I didn't appreciate the gravity of what was occurring underneath my feet. But we did those things without even having to tell him. I mean, you know, we were able to put the plan together. We were able to provide relief. We were able to work with our community. And a lot of those people are the less fortunate, you know, to the least of these, that Bible verse and we as an organization, I think that's one of my I get choked up. I cry anytime, but I get choked up thinking about every time I see those people at that wall. And so anyway, I was proud. That's the most proud that I've ever been of this organization, was what we did for our community in the terms of relief. And I know we have to turn it back on. I know we can't do that forever. However, one thing I want to say, and I'd be amiss not to, in a time where businesses are going out of business, in a time where people are struggling to make payroll, at a time when people outside of the utility industry and outside of this successful organization, I'm sensitive to how that, you know, I want to make sure we weigh that in. And maybe you don't weigh it in. Maybe that's not something we should weigh in. You know, what is the market condition, the economic condition, the what's happening in our industry, in our town, how they've been hit by COVID. And, you know, we've got a lot of support, and maybe that's not a consideration to have. I'm comfortable with Madam Vice's suggestion, but I'm just one person. I'm not the boss. I mean, you guys can have your disagree. Steve.
Steve 3 would know more than I'm going to say, maybe Steve 2. There's always been this elusive goal in HR and salary management of separating compensation and evaluation. I don't know how, I've never been able to see how that happens, but they've always wanted to do that, but it always comes back to that somehow. So as far as evaluating Greg's performance, Greg's done a good job. I cannot say anything different than that. Whether I have enough knowledge and tools to say we ought to give him 2%, 3%, 10% over the COLA, I'll go with whatever everybody wants. But I really kind of like the idea of us sitting down one-on-one or as a group and doing an evaluation of sorts, or at least refreshing our mind on what's happened the last year, and then in a separate session deciding whether that means 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, whatever percent.
With that being said, what are you most comfortable with? So we've got, what I'm hearing is we've got a 3 + 2, and then we got a 3 + 3.5. Which ones are you comfortable with? And Vicki may change her mind. She may be like sliding that scale on over.
The COLA's 3%. I would be comfortable with 2 to 3% on top of that.
So, Madam Vice, what are you comfortable with now, having,
Well, I wanted to hear everybody's opinion, and I think what I'm hearing people say is 5 or 6 total. I think I think that if we did a 3% COLA and a 3% raise, not a bonus, but a raise, and make that a total of 6, I think that's what we are hearing. And what I want to ask you, if that's okay, can I ask?
yes,
Do you feel supported? Do you feel
Absolutely.
like that we are proud of you, that we appreciate all that you've done with a 6%?
I recognize that there are pressures, you know, and the responsibilities, and this is a high-paid position in Clinton, you know, I'm very appreciative of the tone and the support and what I hear. I am very appreciative of that, and I told you where I prefer not to fall, because it's about a message. It's not about the money. I know most of you can believe that. It's not about the money. I make a lot of money, you know. It's Nancy and I, you know. It's about the message. We are at it. It's the message I send to my people. We're exceptional because we feel like we're recognized at being exceptional. And yes, the answer to your question is yes, very much so.
Well, I think I'm hearing everybody saying the same thing, basically. So my recommendation, if you're asking, are you asking me for a recommendation?
I am.
I would like to say the 3% COLA and plus the 3% raise for a total of a 6% increase for this year. And then I think we've resolved how we're going to go forward next year with a one-on-one meeting.
In April.
In April.
And Dudley, I'm holding you accountable for setting all that up, remembering.
You know, what I've just heard here recently, as long as we tell Greg he's doing fantastic, we
That's
don't
a-
have to give him any money.
You know, do you know, that's not that far from the truth. It's really not that far from the truth, because satisfaction in the job is really what you're looking for. Money's a part of it, you know, but being appreciated is very much comforting.
But whatever amount that we end up with, I think it's pretty obvious that he has saved us that much money, either in grants or, I think he's made his own raise, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I agree, and I had a conversation with Greg, and where I suggested that we come up with a bonus structure, and I'm pretty much, in my mind, any bonus structure that we would come up with would greatly outweigh in terms of compensation than the proposed 3+3. When you look at, well, let's tie it to revenue or revenue saved, or, you know, how much of that is. Okay, if it's a fraction of those millions of dollars that he can show through, whether it's Flizzr, whether it's through the long-term partnership with TVA, so on and so forth, pick your poison, which goes back to what you were saying. You start to tie it into metrics, then, you know, that could be not what, you could have some unintended consequences. But every way that I looked at tying it to a metric, there's some large numbers that you could produce, even if it's down to like 1% of the savings.
It's not a target that is good,
Yeah.
because then you lose credibility on what does that number really look like.
Right.
If net income is it, we could have a lot of net income.
So, you know, I had asked him, because I again, you know, being the one individual that's on a ballot every 4 years up here on this board, You know, I want to be sensitive to those that are not in a financial situation that we are in. And I think it's difficult sometimes for some of our partners, some of the public. This is an organization that's well-run. We have an $80 million budget,
80 plus?
very highly profitable company, very well-run. And to run a successful utility board is very difficult, and it takes a lot more than just showing up, opening the door and flicking on the light switch. Because we hear tales and we see tales of struggling utilities, utilities that are in debt, the water and sewer that's a mess. We don't have that here. So we're all going to have phone calls, I'm assuming tonight. But, you know, to me, it's something that I've been prayerful about. I want to do the right thing. I want to do the fair thing. I want to do the equitable thing. What does he deserve? What is the right message? All these things. And so, I was comfortable at 5, but if this board, now I'm adopting Steve's, I hear this board, what I'm hearing is 6, 3 plus 3. And if that's where the board, because what I also would like is us to be unanimous. Obviously you can say no, but I think it'd be nice if we all come to an agreement. I'm comfortable at 6. I preferred 5, but I think 6. Just based off of what he read in other business, when he was reading that, I was thinking, that's why I got him as general manager. And that's like, how do you qualify that stuff? How do you qualify being on the phone with TVA? How do you qualify being in front of Marshall Blackburn and advocating for relief and getting us more dollars and more grants? And how do you quantify that? And all you can really do, in my opinion, is say, your personal standard, is he meeting that and exceeding that? And this year, given all that we've done, given this work, what he continues to do, COVID, I'm comfortable with the 3 plus 3. We've had 3 plus 2, 3 plus 4, and we're 3 plus 3 now.
That was the recommendation.
Do I hear a motion for 3 plus 3?
I'll make that motion.
There's a second. Okay, any discussion? I think we knocked that out. Guys, I think we're doing the right thing. I thank you for your employment. Thank you for your work. Thank you for professionalism. And you can't let him just quit now. I heard him say he's going to retire. He's not going to leave anytime soon.
But like Pacino, is pull him back in.
Yeah. All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No, I'm not opposed, but you made a statement just then about phone calls after we leave here, folks. That's altogether, I guess, kind of what I was coming at. If we all had the same ideas and thoughts and lists that said, here's why Greg deserves that.
Right.
If the phone starts ringing, we all
You say,
sing the
this is
same
why,
song.
this is where we got to where we got, and this is why, and those are the data points. And I think, and I know, because I've seen him put them together before years ago, we can get the justification and it be rooted in the truth and in the numbers.
I'll email you that virtual PowerPoint presentation.
And and I think what's important, Steve, what you're getting at is not the narrative, because it needs to go beyond, the general manager does a great job. We need to be able to articulate that with information, statistics sometimes, and certain goals that were met, like the residential, it's not only that we passed some policies, he went and put all that together. It's not only that we asked about COVID relief, he put that together. And it's not only that we have, how many people realize that we pull employees, engineers all across the country? Very few probably. And it's because of the reputation of this utility board, and also because we live in a great area. I get that, but they could work at a lot of different utilities. So all of that points to, I think, our ability to defend and rationally explain how we arrived at a decision that was rooted not in emotion, but was rooted by the facts. And I think that's what I hear you talking about.
Yeah, and that's, I'm not talking about a PowerPoint presentation. I'm talking about some basic facts that we could explain to somebody over the phone that would help them understand.
Right. I agree. Does everybody understand?
I think after we have our one-on-one next April, you know, to pull together
In a board meeting,
in a board meeting that, you know, these are the 6 points on why we are doing this raise. And that way, that's the talking points. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and again, I've always tried to achieve that separation of compensation and evaluation. Never been able to do it. I mean, you know, you've heard that all your life out at the plants. But that would be an opportunity to say, we sit down, we pull all our thoughts together, here's what he did, here's what he didn't do. Then at some other time, we sit down and say, that's 3%, 5%, 6%, whatever.
I agree. And I know Greg agrees. I don't think he has any.
It'd be much easier to do that.
I think it would make this night much easier and smoother. But I also want to commend the board. This is a night that I've not looked forward to. I don't look forward to it.
It's our favorite night of the year, isn't it, Doug?
Always had this morning.
So I really appreciate, because I think there, again, I'm going to reiterate, there has to be some healthy tension with the board, and we're not just a rubber stamp. We have a duty and we have an obligation, and I think we fulfilled it. There's hard questions that have to be asked. I'm happy and encouraged that Steve sometimes is that force and that voice for us, and I think that we conducted ourselves in a way that brought great credit to this board and to this utility. And is there any other new business?
No, but I would like to say how much I appreciate the board and this evening and the conversation, the discussion, and I appreciate the raise.
You know, there have been times that I've had as many as 200 people that I had to oversee their performance evaluation and their raises. I can't ever remember finding one that was happy about that process. It's just painful. Folks don't like to do it.
Yeah. And it's even equally painful to Steve's comment when he's in the room, you're on camera.
Yeah.
You know, human resources, when you're talking about salaries, there's nothing more personal to somebody than their salary. You know, and the thing about human resources, when you start dealing with salaries, with benefits, there's a personal level to it, but everybody's got an opinion on it too. I mean, everybody doesn't have an opinion, you know, at least I don't, on the kilowatt hours and a lot of the structural stuff that we're talking about. But everybody sitting at the table here has an opinion on, you know, salaries, and everybody's lived through that. So it's hard decisions to make, and especially, you know, with your friend sitting right across the table from you.
Right. Steve, too, got any closing comments?
Great job, both of you.
Madam Vice?
I'm good.
Greg, we're looking forward to a great 2020,
Count on it.
2021. Dudley, you're not leaving.
Break his golf clubs.
With that, this meeting is adjourned.